opportunity because of her. So I'm really grateful and thanks for all her hard work and dedications on this matter. And ladies and gentlemen, salam sejahtera and very good morning to all of you. I'm JitKang from School of Chemical Engineering, University of Science of Malaysia. And today I would like to share with you some of these, the topics related to what is the right journal we should go and how to do the effective literature review. But of course, first of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology for their generous support for the world-class professors program. And that's the where they're actually financially supporting us for this. And I also like to thank the Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia for hosting this program. And I'll be very excited and I'm looking forward to visit UPI in next month or so. So I'll definitely will seeing you all in next month. All right, so before I proceed with my workshop, let me quickly share with you what is University of Science Malaysia. I'm from the School of Chemical Engineering, University of Science Malaysia. And in fact, University of Science Malaysia is a relatively young university compared to UPI. I think you all was founded in 1954, but USM was founded in 1969. So we are like, you all are about 15 years older than us. So you all are very well established old university. Currently, we have around 24,000 students and 1,600 lecturers. And we compose of 3 campuses. We have the main campuses on the Penang Island. Then because I'm working in engineering program, I'm on the engineering campus. Then we also have the medical campuses. So we have 3 campuses. Compared to all, I believe we all have 6 campuses. Right? But we have 24 academic schools and 14 research centers that mainly focus on research. And here is some of the photo about USM. So here is the photo on the main campuses. So since Malaysia is actually being colonized by UK for quite some time, so eventually British Empire, so we have quite some leftover colonial period kind of building is available on campus. And I'm working here. Can you all see my cursor, my mouse cursor? All right. So I'm working here. I think when every time you all think about Penang, right? So this is a small island that come into your mind. So the main campus is actually on the island, but I'm working at the engineering campus. So it's roughly about 41 minutes of drive. So like I think just now, Dr. Fitri mentioned about Engpo, right? Right. Actually, he is working here on the island. So whereas I'm working on the engineering campus, but we know each other quite well. All right. So School of Chemical Engineering, we're constantly ranked up very high, number 1 or number 2, depends on our luck in the country. So at one point, we are ranked number 24 in the world. So we even rank higher than University of Pennsylvania. I don't know why, but that's how the ranking works. And we currently have 32 academic staff with around 300 undergraduate students and 150 graduate students, which is master and PhD, and with 33 supporting staff. All right, so before I talk about everything, I just want to share with all what's my belief about publication, right? I guess now research publications have been turned into a KPI requirements for this, right? I'm just wondering, remember the 1 and 0? 1 is yes, 0 is no, right? Can I ask the questions? How many of you are actually lecturers or researchers that you really need to fulfill publication KPI? If you say yes, 1. If you're a student, you can say 0. Because you're a student, you need to publish, but it's the world boss pushing you. But for researchers, it's the university that pushing them. So how many of you are actually faculty members or researchers with KPI requirement for publication? Can you put in? Me, I need it, so I put 1. Okay. Let's see. All right. Right. Okay. So now I think I saw 3 or 4 1 and mostly a 0. So I guess most of the participants is actually students. All right, good. Okay. The reason I'm asking about this is whenever because of we have such a high requirement for KPI. Sorry. All right. So one of my beliefs is this: if I publish a paper, I guess it's whether it's your students or your lecturer, because remember, even your student now, the most probably one day you will become a lecturer. And when you become a lecturer, the student will read the papers as well. So I'll say this, once I publish one paper, and my name will be associated with this paper forever and ever. And because of that thing, I only need one paper to build my reputation. Anyway, you get to publish 2 papers to win Nobel Prize, right? All you need is one paper to win the Nobel Prize. And also only need one paper to destroy it completely. So be very careful about publications and things like that, because you remember nowadays, once you publish your papers will be online and left for scrutinized by everybody, included your own students. When I first joined the for Science Malaysia, my first PhD student, he go and read every single one of the papers I published in my PhD during my PhD. Right? I guess this is what student currently will do. So of course, for the student, you definitely will really read your advisor paper, right? Because your advisor keep pushing you, right? You have to be a good student. Like what I tell my student, you have to be very good students and work very hard and write good papers. But the moment you open up your PhD advisor or your advisor's papers, when they are still a student, it's crap, right? Of course, then there will be no respect about it, right? So again, remember, we only need one paper to build our reputations, and we only need one paper to destroy our reputation. So publishing our work in the low-tier journals and things like that might bring more harm than good for everybody, right? So be very careful about it. So there's a huge pressure to publish recently, and in fact, just because of that, I guess, especially for developing countries, because like, university like UPI or USM, we are just started, right? Compared to some university have few hundred years of histories. So we're just started with relatively young in research, but we are here to compete with a very old university. So there's always pressure for young university to perform, because we need to catching up. There's a huge catching up we need to make. So there's pressure to publish, right? So if you really look at it, right, there's one paper that's published in Nature's in 2016. And what the paper say is because we can start publishing less and less, and whenever the promotion email promise and things like that. What the concern is really is because nowadays everybody is publishing so many papers online or publishing in the academic journals, the quality of the publication is actually going down. So I guess this is something we all, including me, we have to be very careful, and we really need to pay attention. All right, so let me ask another question. This is not one and zero questions, right? So this is questions, of course. How many papers do Albert Einstein publish throughout his own career, right? So just a quick reminder, Albert Einstein, he published his first paper in 1901, and he published the last paper the year he's passing away in 1955, right? So altogether, he's very active in research. One of the very active researchers in 54 years. So he constantly published. So he started at age 22, he published until end of his life. How many papers do you think Albert Einstein published? To be honest with you, before I check it online, right, I don't know the answer. So please don't cheat, just guess. Anybody want to make a guess? Less than 10? All right, somebody say less than 10. All right. Nobody want to guess? 5? Over 50? All right. 50 say it's over 50. Any more? Anybody want to guess? Be remember this. Albert Einstein, right, is a prolific researcher at his lifetime. That means during his lifetime, in his contemporaries, he's one of the very actively published persons. So he published a lot of papers, in fact, right? So let's look at it. He published 272 papers. If you divided these 272 papers, right, by the year of his publication, he published about 5 papers per year, right? So nowadays, we have a lot of people publish more than 10 papers per year. We even have people publish 100 papers per year. I even met somebody publish 1,000 papers per year, right? But I just want to remind you, Albert Einstein only published 5 papers per year, right? So there's always about quantity and quality. Like you can't publish 100 papers per year, and every paper of every 100 of your papers having exactly same quality as Albert Einstein. Right? So that's just a logical. It's just logic. It's not even you're not even need a rocket scientist to figure it out, right? So now you can see it. Albert Einstein is considered one of the most productive researchers in his lifetime, And he published 5 papers on average, of course, sometimes low, sometimes high, and things like that. But he published 5 papers. All right. So I guess this is, this is just a reminder for us, right? We need to pay attention, especially the scientists. We need to pay attention on the quality of our publication, not the quantity, because eventually it is the quality that matters to the science, that push the scientific frontier, not the number count that really matter. All right. So let's look at a few things that we are going to do it today. We are going to first, this is actually the outline of the talk. We're going to talk about how to select the journals and what's an impact factor, and why literature review is important, because today we're talking about selecting journal and how to do a literature review, right? So we're going to talk about why the literature review is important and how you're going to approach, how you're going to do your literature review, right? I guess this is always the first exercise, right? When you start any of the research, whether you're veterans in research or you're a novice in research, the first thing always is you need to do your literature review. When you write your proposals, when you write your papers, when you start the project, you always do a literature review. So it is always the first step in your research, right? Writing, of course, publication, things like that, almost is the last step, right? So you just report whatever that actually you have come across. But first thing always is literature review. So let's talk about selecting a journal first. All right, so I think everybody should have certain skill in the mind when you're talking about selecting the journals and things like that, right? So if you really look at it, at the top of the pyramid, right, when we're talking about publications and things like that, most journals that come into our mind is actually Science and Nature. So it's considered, right, one of the, like the top 2 journals, the best journals that we can ever go for. That's aim for. That's Science and Nature, at least for a lot of scientists, even you are doing social science research. Then we have certain, hierarchy. At the bottom of Science and Nature, I'll say is because there's a large area like chemistry, physics, biology, and mathematics. So even your education under physics, education whatever. So I think this is the 4th really big area. Of course, you have some social science, economy, and things like that. But for sciences, biology, you can't run away from biology, chemistry, and physics. Each of these large disciplines, they have their top journal. So if you ask me, of course, this is my own personal opinion. I'll tell you, if you're for chemistry, I think it's Journal of American Chemical Societies. That's the best journal. And for physics, it's Physical Review Letters. And of course, for biology, it's Proceedings National Academy of Science. And I'll tell you, these 3 is the top journals in each big discipline area. Then, of course, there's small discipline area like nowadays, nanotechnology is booming. So nanotechnology is a very hot area. So there's some really good journal in nanotechnology that's considered the best journal in nanotechnology. I'll say it's most probably Nature Nanotech or Nanoletter. So these 2 is the best in nano. And for materials, I would say it's Advanced Materials or Nature Materials. So all these best journal in the really large field, chemistry, physics, or biology, or the subfield, which is the best journal in subfield, I would say it's a second tier, right after Science and Nature. So it's placed underneath it. Then the third tiers, I would say, is we have chemistry. Then under the chemistry, we have organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, physical chemistry, colloidal chemistry, and things like that, right? Then I would say all the best journal in each subcategory is actually belongs to here. Then, of course, we have other journals and even some journals that you should avoid. When I was a student in the United States, this is where we aim for. We never really look at other journals. We always aim for this here, right? So we didn't really use impact factor. I will tell you why maybe impact factor is not that important, but I'll focus on if we have a good journal, we want to go for journals. This is the kind of the pyramid that we're thinking. So we are really go for this. At least if my own area, let's say I'm working on colloid interface science, I'll try to go to the best journal in colloid interface science. That means it's Langmuir or Journal Colloid Interface Science and things like that. So those are journals that we'll aim for, right? Then of course, if the work is more significant, then I'm thinking about the next level. Then the next level is JAX and Physical Review Letter. Then the next one is Science and Nature. I'll never think about the others. All right. So I guess every one of us should have something like this in our mind. Right? Maybe the young students are too young to actually understand this thing. But for the lecturers, I think we have to, if you haven't have this kind of skill in your mind, maybe you should start constructing one for yourself. You should think about which is the best journal I think I should go and things like that. And why, the most important thing is why I should go there. right? And I would like to remind you, a few years ago, there's one librarian from University of Colorado of mine. His name is Bill, and he created a Bill list. So he created a Bill list to actually, he published a list of journals that actually is predatory journals in nature. That means those journals, they publish work not because they want to advance sciences. They publish work most probably because they want to make money, right? So they're almost like an insurance agent that keep going everywhere and asking people to, to subscribe to their journal archive, or it's an open access journal, so they just keep inviting people to actually publish. So I would say if you publish in that kind of journals, then you actually harming your reputations more than you're building your own reputation. So try to keep an eye on those journals who actually is predatory in nature. All right, so now let's talk about what is an impact factor. I guess when you first submit, like just now, I think Dr. Chi also said we have Q1, Q2, and things like that. How they quantify Q1, Q2, and things like that is based on the impact factor. So it's almost like they have a big series of journals, right? So they have calculated impact factor of each journal. Then eventually the top 25% is belongs to Q1. Then top 50, Q2, whatever, and things like that. But first of all, we need to understand what is impact factor, right? So my question is, do you understand how the impact factor is being calculated? In the chat box, I say 1 because yes, I know how to calculate it. The question is, do you know how the impact factor is being calculated? Or if you don't know or you're not sure, then you can put 0 as well. All right, so we have a lot of 0. All right. Let's talk about what is impact factor, right? So you keep come across, and I think the first thing, especially I guess for at least I think for Malaysia, the students, they always have to check impact factor. So when they want to publish a paper, they always check an impact factor. All right. So what is an impact factor? Okay, let's say, right, I create a journal. This journal is called journal ZZZZ. Right? Because I want to publish, right? I can't publish anywhere, so I create my own journal. So I can publish in my own journal, right? So eventually I'm the editor of this journal, then I publish 1 article in this journal. This article got 1 citation. Then I publish another articles. Then this articles also got 1 citation. Now, of course, I can't keep publishing my own journal, right? So I invite other people to publish. I invite my stupid friend. My stupid friend got published and got 0. I'm better than him, right? I got 1 citation, he got 0 citation. Then I saw it, I say, all right, we can't do it. We need to somebody who are really good, right? So I invite my PhD advisor to publish a paper, and he's a chair professor, and he got 6,477 citation for his particular paper. Then eventually, then I invite other friends, and also me writing papers and things like that. Then got no citation at all. So in 2 years' time, in 2 years, right, in this journal ZZZZ, we got altogether 143 articles. We published 143 articles. So then, of course, then the total number of articles published in 2 years is 143. Then the total number of citation in the 2 years on all these 143, how much is citation? All got 0, right? Only this is 7,477, and my 2 paper got 1, right? So it's 6,477 plus 1 and plus 1. This is 6,479. And you guess what's the impact factor of this journal? The impact factor is 45.308. That's exactly how impact factor is being calculated. Can you see how ridiculous it is? There's only 1 paper are so highly cited, right? The other paper is almost have no citation at all. But eventually, the impact factor of this is higher than Science and Nature, right? And you thought this is irony, right? Because I'm just telling you all a story, right? So it's like a grandpa tell you all a nighttime story. So it's not going to happen that way, because we are all scientists. We are very serious person, right? This is such a ridiculous scenario. It's never going to happen in the scientific world, right? Guess what? Let me say that there's one journal called Foundation of Crystallography. They publish mostly in crystallography and things like that. So in 1 year, right, they publish 1 paper. The paper is about a short history of shape. This program. It's almost a small program that they use, but most people working on the crystallography, they use it for analysis purposes and things like that, right? So eventually, they say something like that. This paper could serve as a general literature citation when one or more of the open source blah blah are employed in the course of crystal structure determination, right? So they just say you can just cite our paper. This paper is actually for this program. And guess what? In 2008, this journal, the impact factor is 2.051. And after that, impact factor become 49. Just because of this one paper. Its impact factor jumped from 2.051 something, almost, I think it's Q3, whatever, Q4, Q3. Then at the end, it becomes #1 journal in everywhere. Because impact factor is 49. So the impact factor, remember just now I tell you all nature science, right? I also told you about best journal is Journal American Chemical Society, Proceeding National Chemical Science, or Physical Review Letter. This journal is larger, the impact factor larger than all these, the best journal that you can even imagine, right? So I guess the bottom line is take this impact factor as a grain of salt. It serves as a references, or it's a good reference for us, but it is not the only references for us. Right, so we need to be very careful to interpret this number, which is called impact factor. All right, then of course you ask me, if that's the case, then what kind of journal should I go? Right, I guess the best advice I can give to you is perhaps you should go for the journal that is published by professional society rather than the private publisher. So you should aim to go for professional society. The reason why I say that is because the professional society, right, they have a huge readership based on their own expertise. Let's say American Chemical Society. The name already tell you it's related to chemistry or chemical engineering. Or Royal Society of Chemistry, then you know it's related to chemistry or chemical engineering. Those kind of publishers are very specialized in publishing journal related to chemistry and chemical engineering. And those are the publisher that you should aim for. Then after you know the publisher, then you go and search around what is the journal that is more appropriate to you. I guess that's a very making sense way to decide which journal you should go. And of course, the second way, of course, if you are students, you should ask your advisor, or you should ask your senior colleague in the same research area. Especially when you're young researchers, you just have your PhD in some field, and eventually when you come back to let's say for example, you work in Japan, you work in Korea, or you work in the United States, it's developed country, right? When you come back to Indonesia, Malaysia, is the developing countries. So there's a huge research gap in between. So you're thinking maybe it's not relevant for you to keep working on this research area. You might want to change your research area. If you want to change your research area, right, and the first time you go into a new research area, you might need to think about which journal you want to go. So I guess a very making sense thing is actually you ask your senior colleagues. So go for those journals that have higher standing and reputation among the research community. That means which are the journals that top professors in your research area or in this research area they are reading, right? So those are the journals that you should go. And sometimes I will say that quite regularly those journals are not high impact factor journals. Right. I have one of my research areas is computation fluid dynamics. There's one journal published by Cambridge Physics. It's called Journal of Fluid Mechanics. The impact factor is super low. Right? It's super low. And I think it's Q3 or whatever. But it's so difficult to get in. And if you publish one paper in that particular journal, and people will think very highly about you, especially in my research area. So I guess those are the journals that I'm really aiming for. So I guess this is also the journal that we should be aiming for. Right. So I guess the third golden rule of thumb is in your own research area, which is the journal that you keep reading. Let's say, for example, you started as a young student when you don't know exactly where you want to publish, and you keep doing, when you're doing literature review, which I'm going to get into it, literature review. When you come to literature review, you read a lot of papers coming from the same journals. And let's say, for example, ACS Nano. And so maybe this is the journal that you should targeting, because a lot of your research work, right? People that are doing similar work like you actually publish in this journal. So maybe that means, which means those people who are also going to read regularly in this journal, which means your work is most probably will be benefiting them, right? So it's best to go for this kind of journal because at the end, your targeted audience, that means the people who are going to read your papers are sharing the same research interests and research background and same nature of work like yours. I guess this is a really important message. So for those who really have hard time to choose, maybe this is what you should adhere to. In fact, right, just recently, one of my students tell me another rule he is using, right? And another rule that my student telling me he's using is, he told me he will go to journal. If he read a lot of paper from one journal, that's so difficult to read, right? And it's very challenging to read and very difficult to understand, especially the mathematics is very difficult. And those are the good journal, because he think that because the journal, the publisher work that very difficult, very challenging, and very few people actually know exactly how to do it and things like that. Those are good journal, which I don't think is wrong, right? But eventually you can imagine, so some of the journal is very challenging to go in and things like that. So the maths is very thorough and things like that, especially for case if you're working on mathematics. All right, so before I continue to get into why literature review important, do any of the audience have any questions you want to ask on selecting the journals? All right, we got one thing. You from Uriana, you say impact factor is the standard to measure the quality of a journal. All right, I'll say the answer is yes and no. Remember just now how I discussed how the impact factor is being calculated, right? So you can have one papers that having a huge impact, huge citation. At the end, this citation will translate into huge impact factor. So all you need is to have one or two high quality paper that everybody is citing, and eventually your impact factor is all the way going up. And in fact, we also see recently, like a lot of journals started to play around or toying with impact factor by publishing a lot of review articles. And for those who don't know what is review articles is articles that have been written by certain people to summarize the research work of a lot of people in the research area, right? So when you're summarizing other people's work, right, so it's very easy to read. So review articles normally get a really high citation. And so those journals that publish a lot of review articles will definitely got a very, very high impact factor, right? And think about what is review articles. Review articles is just summarizing other people's work. So there's no any quality whatever in the science, right? Because it's just revising other people's summarize. Of course, there's quality in terms of summarizing, best summarization or whatever it is, but it's not going to help in terms of scientific progress too much, right? So impact factor, I would say, is a double-edged sword. It could helping us, especially management of a university, admin staff of a university, management team of a university, to make their life easy. So they could just use impact factor to gauge, oh, you publish Q1, high impact factor is a good journal, blah, blah, blah. But it's a double-edged sword. Now we have seen a lot more journal coming out with very high impact factor, but actually it's a very lousy journal, right? So I guess we have to take it as a grain of salt. All right. So
probably may I have question?
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe in our case, we also being used to know about the normalized impact factor. So could you please explain about that?
All right. Okay. I'm not really. I'm not quite familiar with how the normalized impact factor is calculated. Dr. Fitri, can you elaborate a bit? You means you normalizing it with what?
At somehow maybe each journal has own calculations, but if I'm not mistaken, for example, they calculated for certain period, for example, for 5 years.
Okay.
So yeah, normally it known as or it called as the SNP, yeah.
Sure.
Like the normalized impact factor, because as you said, sometimes is quite tricky.
Yeah.
At certain journal, for example, this year around 1 impact factor, but at next year it could be over 40 or something. Yeah.
Yes.
Then it's incredibly, how to say, change. So
Sure. Sorry, I can't answer this question because I don't know exactly how the normalized impact factor is being calculated. But I guess whatever Dr. Fritri is saying just now making sense, because one of the problem now, we will look at how you calculate impact factor, right? Because they calculate for 2 years. They only take into account the citation in the last 2 years. Let's say this year is 2022, right? So the impact factor that you read in all the journal website, they only account for the reference citation they received in 2021 and 2020, then divided by the total number of the paper they published in 2021 and 2020. And that's the impact factor. So as you could see, it's a very short-term gain, right? So the short-term gain for scientific progress, some of the scientific progress or some scientific idea take years to progress. Later on, I will have something like that, 50 years, 60 years to progress. Even that after Nobel Prize winning idea has been published, it takes 30, 40 years for it to develop, even understand the phenomena better before it's even developed into the mature technology. So it's a long process. So I guess impact factor is a very short-sighted gain, and very short is a number that actually based on very short-sighted gain. So I think maybe 5 years would be more making sense. I would rather have some impact factor that's 10 years. But of course, that's very unfair, right? For some of the journals, because some of the journals, especially for new journal. So by having this kind of matrices, then the new journal can't compete with the old journal, because you just get in, you only have 1 year of citation. Then if you want to divide it by 10 years, then eventually your impact factor definitely is been like 10 times smaller than all the journal that publish, have 50 years of history or whatever. All right. Sure. Thanks, Dr. Fitri. Any more questions? All right. I guess the take-home message is this. We are all scientists that we want to make sure the science is in progress collectively to benefit our country, the society, and whatever. And we couldn't just keep playing with a number game, right? We need to make sure the quality of the science is there, and we need to together pushing the scientific frontier to the next level, right? And writing a lot of paper is not going to be helpful. We need to write a lot of very high quality paper that will be helpful. I'm not saying writing a lot of paper is wrong. There's people who can, some research area can have very active and can have a lot more paper compared to certain research area. But the thing is the quality need to be there. All right. If there's no more questions, let me continue to the why the literature review is important, right? All right, so this is just my observation. It might be wrong, but that's exactly what I observed for on all the students. Especially there's a lot of students in this now. I don't know exactly how this is. I think it's about 80 participants now, right? So a lot of you are students. So this might be wrong. So if you're wrong, please yell at me or in the chat box say no, you're wrong, right? But this is my observation. If I plot ambition as the y-axis, ambition x y-axis, and I plot time as the x-axis, right? So what I have is at the very beginning, at the very beginning of the study, right, the student ambition is very high. They're very ambitious. So if you ask the master and PhD student, when they're first joining a master and PhD program, right, they start doing a research, the ambition is very high. Nobel Prize level high. So Nobel Prize winning. Yeah, come on, you're doing research, right? Of course, if you're doing research, of course, you're aiming to do the best research. And what is the outcome of best research? Of course, it's winning a Nobel Prize, right? So that's a higher ambition. Then after a few months, right? After, especially after you started, doing literature review, then you talk to your advisors and things like that. Just like, oh, maybe that is not really possible for me to win Nobel Prize. So I'd rather to become a famous scientist. Okay, it's still good, right? It's a huge achievement to get recognized and everybody know you are very good in doing your science, right? And the time progress. Then I start to witness my student motivation get down. They might not even thinking about doing science anymore. Forget about science. I'll better go and become engineers. I'm from chemical engineering school, right? School of chemical engineering. So after they're doing finish, they still have option to go to work as engineers in a company. So they may think, then I see also a lot of my students thinking, forget about this. I have to forget even about science. I'll go and earn big money to become engineers, right? And start earning money. Then as the time progresses, what happens is, instead of getting a good job, they're thinking, well, forget about it. I just want to get a job, right? And you see that the motivation and ambition keep going down, right? Then at the end of the PhD or master cycle, then what you get is some students just want to get this stupid thing done and graduate. They don't care about whether getting a job, winning a prize, they don't care. What they want is just want to graduate. Then of course, at the end, you thought when this is low, right? Then you could see it, yes, don't care anymore, right? I just want to like my kitty sitting on the sofa, drink beers and get drunk and watch TV. And the reason why I bring out this ambition versus year curve to you all, because remember, I'm going to talk about literature review, right? And guess what? The literature review is actually here. You'll be doing a literature review, especially if you're a master student, as we are working on your master thesis, right? You'll be doing a literature review here at the beginning of your master thesis, when your ambition is still high, right? So if you didn't do a very good literature review, right, forget about thinking about do any good thing about in your research. It's not going to happen at all, because you most probably, when you do a literature review, when your ambition is very high and very motivated. So that's important, right? And what's a literature review? I would say, if you want me to summarize, I would say that literature review is just to know your stuff, right? This is one of the professors, Randy Powell. I don't know how many of you heard about him. He gave the last lectures. He gave these lectures before he passed away. When he gives these lectures, he already have terminal cancer, something like that. So he's one of the professors in my previous university in the United States. And one of the important message that he gave is, you got to get the fundamental down, because otherwise the fancy stuff is not going to work, right? And literature review is like your fundamentals. You really need to understand the fundamentals. If otherwise, nothing else is going to work. So literature review is really providing you with fundamentals, right? So what is the literature? The literature is about like telling a story, right? So it's like a chain story that, when you go and read papers and things like that, each of papers is written by authors. They have a part of the story that they want to share. So they create previously, and the existing literature is the story so far. So you just want to expand on the whatever stories. So you start reading other people's and you start writing. The best questions before you start starting your research, right? The best question to ask yourself, and also to advisors. So if you already started do your master's degree, but you haven't asked yourself this question, or you haven't challenged your advisor with these questions, please go ahead and ask this question. Do the questions I or we wish to answer are worthy of the research? Right. I guess these are the questions that you need to keep asking yourself. It's not only started in the literature review, it's throughout the whole time spans of your master degree or for your research career, right? I think it's something that we always keep asking ourselves. What is the benefit, or what is the gain? It can be scientific gain, knowledge gain, economic gain, whatever, but you need to lead into something, right? Right. Sometimes it can be fun. All right, I do this because it's fun, it's interesting. I just want to solve it, especially for scientists. I think it's perfectly fine. It's a very fun question to answer. It's a very important question to answer, whatever. But you need to ask, is it worthy of your research? Because remember, when you're doing research, you're using funding, right? And normally the funding is paid by the taxpayer. So we scientists, we're having the nicest job in the world, where people not only paying for us, they also paying us to do our hobby. So we need to have certain level of accountability. We can't just always go for fun, right? We can definitely enjoy our research. That's for sure. We can have a lot of fun in doing our research. But I guess the more important thing is, what is your research, or what is the gain of your research, and what is the research questions that you are trying to answer worthy of any of your efforts or not? Of course, I think your advisor or your mentor, if you're a young lecturer, of course, then the mentor is the most senior members. The mentor is whether the role in your research review is pointing you to the right direction, right? This is very important, because if they didn't do it properly, that's what happens, right? You crash, right? So if it doesn't point into the right direction, then you crash. And so what you will be getting by doing a good literature review, I guess the first thing that we'll be getting is to provide an overview and critical appraisal, right? For example, let's say I guess quite a lot of the participants actually attending today is from a chemistry or science background, right? So the important aspect is, you need to, when you do a literature review, is to provide you a general overview for what's happening in the project you're about to undertake, in which you should have one hypothesis, right? So it's provide an overview hypothesis. I make a very specific example. For example, I'm interested to work on graphene, because a lot of people now work on graphene. If I publish in graphene and things like that, definitely my citation will be very high. Then my H index will be very high. But that's not enough, right? Graphene, because there's so many things you can be done with graphene, right? So you need to be very specific. I want to work graphenes, maybe I want to work on the graphene deposition of a paper substrate for sensing purposes. Now I have very specific project, right? Graphene deposition on paper substrate for sensing purposes. And now that alone, that direction alone, now I could use it to do my literature review. And my first thing is the literature review that should definitely provided to me is what is the current and the past thought about this, the deposition of the graphene on paper substrate. Is this idea even worthy of research? So it really need to be critically assessed and evaluated. Then of course it started to put puzzle, right? One of the literature review is when you started your literature review, there are always some questions in your, some doubt in your mind. So literature review actually give you to fill in the puzzle for you. So eventually determine the right directions, right? Like just now, remember just now, this deposition of graphene on the paper substrate for sensing purposes is very specific master thesis kind of title. But there's so many things that you can do. You can work on the physical aspect of the deposition. You can work on the chemistry aspect of the deposition. You can even work on the biological aspect if you want to use it for biological application, right? So it's really need to, when you do literature review, something like that, then you really need to focus on which direction you want to go, right? So literature review will give you what's the direction you want to go. And it's, of course, it's rationalize your study. So does it even make sense to deposit the graphene onto a paper substrate? Do the pi and pi interactions is going to influence the sensor performance? Do paper and pi interactions, fiber, cellulosic fiber interactions with nanomaterials is going to do anything or not? Do the electrostatic interaction is going to be very harmful and substantial? Those are the things that when you start to thinking about your do literature review, then you'll tell you whether this thing is actually logical or not, to rationalize whatever you're trying to do. So it's good, that's literature review. And of course, the last thing of the literature review is to actually set the boundaries of your study, right? So it's not only, you can't, reading, I think one of the really important, one of the advices I will give to all people, especially the young student, reading is fun, right? Especially when you first started to read. Then of course, suffering and fun together. The fun part is actually you keep learning a new thing. The suffering, of course, is there's a lot of new things, take a lot of efforts to understand. And so a lot of students will be in the reading mode forever, stuck in the reading mode. That means they read the Wikipedia. Now, especially nowadays, Wikipedia, there's a lot of link, right? You click on the link, then, oh, I read about this, then, oh, I don't understand that, I click in, then click. In less than 2 minutes, you have been deviated away from the main direction of your work. Remember, the reason why you do literature review, you do your literature review to provide technical background, fundamentals for your research work. So you shouldn't be deviated too far away from your literature review. And that's what literature review can actually setting the boundary for your work, which is really important. I'll coming back for all these 4 things again, right? So let me start to talk about, instead of keep telling you all why we should do literature review, I think it's important to how to do your literature review, right? So let me go into how do you do your literature review for your project, right? So I can break this approaching your literature review into 5 parts, right? The first part is very easy, right? The first part is you need to find a model. What I mean, I find models. Let's say whenever you first started your project, right? You need to look for other literature review in your discipline and read them to get an idea of what kind of themes or what kind of ideas that actually match with you or agree with you, or whatever. The best thing is to do it right by using the review articles, like what I tell you all, right? I'm just asking how many of you do not understand? Can you put 0 on the chat box if you don't understand what is review articles, what review articles mean? Let's say I know how the review article works, I just keep quiet. But if you don't know, can you put 0 in the chat box? So I know some of you don't understand what is review article. Right? Let me type in again, just in case you can hear me correctly. Review articles. You understand what review articles mean? All right, I don't see any zeros. I assume everybody understand what is a review. Okay, without don't understand review. Okay, let's talk about this. Review, whenever, right, when we start doing research, right, let's say my work, I'm working on the colloid interfaces, I'm working on nanomaterial. Then I start to publish my results, my own results. The paper that I write about my own results is called research articles, right? It's a form of research articles, right? So that means it's my result. I write the papers based on my result, based on analysis of my result, and a description to my result, analysis and everything, interpretation of my interpretation, things like that. Let's say I'm working on magnetic nanoparticles. Then of course, I'm not the only one that working on magnetic nanoparticles. A lot of people working on magnetic nanoparticles, right? So all of them publish their own research articles, I mean their own results. Then once a while, then one person coming out, and the person normally is a quite established scientist or the seniors members of the research area that writing a review articles. He just summarize, that means he read through most of the articles, research articles in that area. Then he summarized what people have been doing. And he write one papers to summarize everything, everyone work, right? Of course, included himself. And normally in the review articles, you have a lot of a lot of reference lists, 300, 400. The reason is because the research area, a lot of people have been working on it. They've published a lot of paper, right? So the one who summarized them have to say, okay, Lim have done this thing, then the other one have done this, whatever. The Lim direction is on cell separation, blah, blah, and things like that. And that's called review articles. That means it's the articles that are written not based on their own results, but it's based on the summary of everyone in that particular area, right? So I'll say, if you are new to a research area and you just started to read your literature review, I guess it's very important and very making sense, especially you get one really good review articles written by top scientists in your own area. The review articles written by the top scientists in your area can help you a lot, even more than the research articles, because he already summarized to you what have been done by others, what is a challenge in this area, and maybe what is the possible future work, right? Especially if written by a top scientist in your area, because they will be very short and tell you exactly what lay out the roadmap, right? So I think the first thing, important thing is, if for literature review, if possible, you need to go and find a review articles written by the top scientists. I'm not saying just a review articles, no, I'm saying a review articles written by top scientists in your area. I think that's very important. Of course, then afterwards you ask me what's top scientist, I'll coming back to it immediately after all this. All right. So that's one thing. Review articles can be very helpful. So there's some journal. If you can't know, right, what is the top scientist, right? For example, I just started. How do I know who is the top scientist? You know, like some people just, you know, everybody come in there, everybody tell me I'm top scientist, right? So what I would suggest is you can check the top journal in your area, the best journal in your area, that actually publish some review articles. Because normally those really good journal, right, when they publish review articles, it's not based on some submission. That means it's not like I submit to them. It's based on invitation. That means the editor invite people to write or contribute review articles. So in my research area, I think the Nano Today is a good research article. It's a journal that only publish the review articles. And Account of Chemistry Research is also a journal that actually publish review articles only. So those are the journals that you might need to look at when you first started your literature review, or to find references for your work. All right. And of course, the easiest way, right, is if you have any seniors, your senior already working on this area, or you take over the project. Sometimes the project has been developed in a group for many years. Your senior is developed methods, then you use this method for something. Then the thesis published by your group or published by any group that working have similar research ideas and things like that, or is in the area, definitely is helping, right? So there's some website that actually, you know, like even they publish you can find the MIT, you know, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is the best engineering school, the thesis from there, or thing like you should go and check on it. But I would say especially if you are using your senior thesis. That means the former members of the group, their thesis as a model to start your literature review, right? You have to be very careful to avoid Control C and Control P. When I say Control C, Control P, I mean copy and paste. Remember, nowadays, I don't know about Indonesia, but I guess it's very strict everywhere. If you copy and paste other people's thesis into your own thesis, right, without rewriting it, even you cite them, without rewriting it properly, is considered a form of plagiarism. Especially you copy a huge chunk of the sentence. You can copy 2 pages and you thought, I put in 2 pages, then I cite my senior thesis, right? That's considered plagiarism, right? So be very careful about it and do not. Now you graduate, I'm graduating from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, one of the best university in Indonesia. I carrying a master degree with me. Then I go to work in big company in Indonesia. Then everybody know I'm a master degree holder. Then later on, only people realize your master thesis have been plagiarizing other people's work. Then of course UBI have to pull out your master degree. Then you end up with no master degree. That's a very embarrassing situation. So please don't do it. Especially do not copy and paste any of other people's work into your thesis. You need to rewrite everything, right? So be very careful, especially if you use your senior thesis, because of your senior thesis normally passed to you in the Word document, right? Very easy to copy and paste. So you need to be very careful about it. All right, before I move on into the second point, any questions you want to ask about this? Especially about plagiarism? Because you are going to write literature review very soon in your thesis or whatever, right? So if you have any questions, okay.
Yeah, there is a question, Professor,
Right.
in the chat.
Sure. How many articles must be reviewed in order to create one review article? All right, Karina, very good questions. Just coincidentally, I have the answer in my slide, in the next few slides. I'm coming back to this question. All right, please remind me about coming back to this question because I'm going to answer this question in the next few slides. I already have an answer for it. All right, any more questions? All right, Karinta, I will coming back to you right after this. All right. Okay, so once we find the model, that means you actually, just like you are like me. I'm very lucky to I have 2 PhD advisors, and both my PhD advisor is a very good, fantastic PhD advisor. I would say they're even better than me. Now I'm also be a PhD advisor for my student, right? I think my advisor is a much better advisor than me. They're very proactive, very caring, very fatherly or motherly, and taking good care of me. So now if let's say you started from the beginning, right? You have the right PhD direction, your advisor, your master advisor pointing you, remember just now pointing you to the right directions, and they're very knowledgeable, they tell you what journal you need to read with and things like that, right? So when it comes to doing literature review, they can't help you, right? You need to do your own literature review. So how should you do your literature review? I'll say is this: you need to start your literature review, especially when you are young, when you are new. You need to start with problem formulation. What I mean by problem formulation, right? The most common mistake that I saw today by the young student when they do literature review is they go in and start read everything. Exactly like my concern just now, Wikipedia, right? Remember my Wikipedia just now? Because Wikipedia now is so informative, right? It's educational and very informative. So you can just go and read. Then there's a link that you can easily click in. So especially when you're young, you do not understand this research area. So a lot of things you don't understand. So you just click. The more you click, the more you deviate away from your literature review. Because remember, there's always a time limit. You need to finish your master thesis or you need to write a paper in 2 months time, 4 months time, whatever. So, or like master is like 2 years or 3 years. You need to do it in 3 years time. So you can't just every day go and read blindly. You need to develop a strategy. And one of the important strategy it is, right? So for example, if the goal of review is to integrate the research outcome, then a meaningful research question should be this. That means whenever you today I come and sit down in front of the computer. I want to do literature review. I want to read something for my master thesis. I really need to ask the questions first. What the question is, I need to formulate the question first. What is this? That means from the previous literature, what's the effect of X on Y and Z? Let's say, for example, like just now, deposition of graphene on the paper substrate, right? What is the influences of temperatures of the deposition rate and the deposition depth? Time dependency, space dependency, X, Y, and Z, right? So I'm talking about X. What is X? X in my temperatures, outcome on time and space, kinetic rate. And so they have other journal, they're talking about the influence of pressure. Because I only want to care about temperature. In pressure, I skip. I won't read about it at all. Influences of the particle concentration. Yes, it's interesting, it's very helpful knowledge, whatever, but it's not related to what I'm going to do it today. Because remember, today I sit in front of my computer, I do literature review. I only want to focus on the influences of temperatures on time, the rate, and space, and that's what I want to do. Then how about temperatures on the surface roughness? Nope, I don't want to read about it. If any paper, where I found a paper that's talking about surface roughness, how temperature influence surface roughness, I won't look at it. So I get very focused, right? So I've always been staying on the path of my literature review, because at the end, my thesis is all about the influences of temperatures on these two parameters, right? It will be good for me to have some general knowledge about influences of pressure on it, or influences of particle concentration, whatever. But for today, or for effective literature review, what I want to do it now is I want to focus fire on these two. Right. Once the war is fine, you can go and read generally interesting purpose, whatever. I think it's important to develop breadth, but for your thesis, remember, or your research papers, it's a depth that you really need. So you really need to focus fire on the depth. All right. Wait a minute. Sorry, my computer sometimes hangs. All right. So this is one of the strategy, right? So of course, based on this, right, there's also other, like, what system methods have been used in the past to investigate phenomena X. Let's say you want to investigate a method, right? Especially for experimentalists, right? So like just now, like the case of graphene, deposition of graphene on the paper substrate, I want to find a way to how I want to deposit this graphene onto the paper matrix, right? So I want to go investigate on it. And so what I care is, I just want to know the process of deposition. If they have, say, the process of, the other processes and things like that, I don't want to know, at least at this point. I just want to focus fire on one thing and one questions at a time, right? To start your literature review. All right. So how should I've been talking about all the philosophy thing and how should do it and things like that. But the real thing is how you want to search, right? That means the stupid Google is in front of me. What should I type in order to get the result that I want, right? When it comes to literature research, remember, just now I tell you all, right? You need to identify a top scientist. That's very important, right? So what you need to do, you can trace an author who are prominent in your subject, right? All right, I think a lot of you all are from a chemistry background. Any of you can tell me who is him? Wait a minute, I don't know whether I put his name somewhere here. Any people idea, especially if you are working on nanomaterials? Anybody want to guess who is him? All right. Let me see in the chat box. And then, okay. So he's Josh Whiteside. He's one of the, I would say that in a very famous chemistry professors from Harvard Chemistry. And I think his H index is like 200 something, if I'm not mistaken. He's one of the most highly cited researcher of all time. In 2000, I think, I don't know whether he's still this year or not, but he's one definitely hundred of thousands or maybe few hundred of thousands of citations. Not only him, he have graduated a lot of very good students, and all his students now become the professors in MIT, in Harvard, in Yale, in Cambridge, whatever, it's all his students, a lot of them, right? So the reason why it is important for you to know at least one top scientist in your area, because then you can base on him and expand your research, research. For example, how you should do it. One of his research area is self-assembly. You see, if I Google Scholar self-assembly, one of the papers got 7,865. Just one of his papers is more than the citation is more than my whole citation for my whole collection of my whole citations. And you could combine using self-assembly the keyword of your research with the name of top scientists. I have questions. Is there any case after a minor revision the manuscript can be rejected? Tessa, that it will be considered about the paper submissions, and I'm going to give another workshop specifically to answer these questions in the next Monday, right? So thanks for asking these questions, but definitely you do not want to miss the next Monday lecture series on how to handle the manuscript submissions and things like that. I'll talk very detailed about submissions, rejections, and of course how to write the cover letter. All right. But if we're talking about literature review, combining keywords and the top scientist name will be very helpful. And one cool thing about the Google Scholar, right? If you look at the site by 7,865, right? In fact, I could really click on it, you know? If I click on it, what happened now? What the meaning of site by this 7,865, which means this paper has been published in 2002 in Science magazines. And so far, there's 7,865 people have cited this paper. The reason why clicking on this site by is very important is because then it will come with a list of the paper who have been cited this paper since 2000. Cited, that means this paper will be published, then only people can refer to it, then they cite it in their work. And so it is important for you to not only refer to the old work, but also new work, right? So by identifying one key papers, right, written by one top scientist in your area, you can use it as your reference point to expand your literature review, which I think is a very powerful strategy. So you just have one paper. Of course, the good thing about this paper is you can also check the reference list of this paper. Then you can start it from the reference list. Then on top of that, you can also expand it based on its citation through Google Scholar. I don't know, do UPI subscribe to Scopus or Web of Science? Do you all have the access to this database by UPI on campus, of course?
Yeah, to several journals managed by Scopus. We have
all right.
access.
Then that is good. That means you're not only relying on Google Scholar. Google Scholar, of course, is free. You can do it whatever it is. But you also have a Scopus that can use as a database to expand your literature review, right? So remember, not to. Of course, I'm using Google Scholar as examples here, but not just relying on Google Scholar. You can play around with any keywords by combining the name of the scientist and the keywords of your research to have a more powerful, more specific search, right? Which I think is important, right? And this paper has published quite some years ago in Nature. I think it's about 6 years ago, in 2018 or something, or sorry, 2016 or something. So far, this is the amount. If we stack the first page of all the scientific publication, right, that we have, that already been published, it can go up to the mountain, the height of a mountain. Only very few papers are actually people are referring to. And you could see the red line here is the one that having a citation that's more than 10,000, right? So if you look at us having a citation of more than 10,000, the papers, it's less than 0.01%. It's not even 0.001%, right? So again, we could working on a very interesting problem. We also can working on a very fun problem. We can also working on the academically scientifically very important paper. But eventually the citation, that means not many people will going to benefit out from our work. And in fact, even some Nobel Prize winning idea, that means they publish the work, the Nobel Prize is given to this recipient based on their work in this area. So they publish these papers and things. Not even some of the Nobel Prize winning idea papers have a lot of citation, right? And some is because they are just so out from their futures. So it takes time for people to recognize it, and in order to cite it slowly and things like that. Then of course, some of the thing is scientifically it's interesting, but it's really difficult to make it as a technology. Because when it comes to citation, I think you have a lot of citation, especially if you're working on the application of something. All right. So let's have a more relaxed way. Just now I'm talking about impact factor. Now let's talk about H index and how we calculate H index. Right. So of course, just now, Ibumita, when you showed to me and tell my H index is 39, right? So what is the H index and how we calculate it? All right. So if let's say, right, of course, the H index actually proposed by H. That's why the H name. So it's him. He published a paper in Proceeding Nation Academy of Science, a very good journal, an index to quantify an individual scientific research output. This is a paper talking about H index and things like that. And since then, 2005, then everybody talking about H index now. All right. Let's say me, right? I publish 6 papers. I have 6 papers. And I published 6 papers. I got citation of 12. My first paper I published is already quite old, right? So I have 12 citation. Then another paper got 10, another paper got 7, another paper got 5. Then of course, then the most recent one I got 0, haven't. So what is my H index? Anybody want to give me a guess? I have 6 papers. Let me see the chat. You can put your number in the chat. So I have 1 paper cited 12 times, 1 paper cited 10 times, 1 paper 7 times, 1 paper 5 times, and the other 2 and 0. All right. The H index of me, right, is 4. Why it is 4? That means I only have H index 4. That means I only have 4 papers that have been cited for 4 times. Again, my H index 4 means I have 4 papers that has been cited at least for 4 times. Now, of course, you argue. And how about if this paper right now is 5, citation 5. If I become 6, how much H index of me? Still 4. Why still 4? Because I only have 4 papers that have been cited by 4 times and more. I only get my H index only increased to 5, right? Provided this paper been cited for 3 more times. That means now I have 5 papers have been cited by 5 times. Okay, repeat again. So follow the thing is, what is H index? My H index is 4 now. That means I have 4 papers that have been cited by at least 4 times. So even my one of these papers have been cited by extra 3 citations, it become 8. Then this a lot become 200 or whatever. I still only have H index 4 unless either one of these papers been cited by 5 times. Because now I don't have the 4 papers have been cited. You see, so I only need 3 more in order for my H index to be 5. Right. So that's what we mean by H index. Okay. Now a quick test. Right. Now we have Mr. Bin, right? So Mr. Bin has this paper citation. All right. He have 1 paper a lot. Mr. Bin is a very, very prolific and very reputable scientist. 783 times. Then 90, 32, 30, 30, 28, 19, 11, 9, 6, 6, 1. What is Mr. Bin H index? I see whether 11, 11. Anyone? Okay. Okay. Hafiz, congratulations. The winner is Hafiz. The H index is 9, not 11. The reason why it is 9, because if you look at it, right, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 papers, at least 9 papers has been cited by 9 times. So my H index is 9. I can only become 11, right? How can I only become? So since you all are so obsessed with 11, Mr. Bin can only become 11 when now this is already relevant. That's fine. So this, 2 more citation. This need 5 more citation, and this paper need 5 more citation. Then I have 11, 11, 11. Then I have 11 paper got 11 citation at least, then my H index become, or Mr. Bin H index become 11. And that is what the meaning of H index, right? Of course, H index, we are so good, right? Especially Asian people, I think, because we are so good in mathematics. And once you know how this number is being calculated and been estimated, there's always a way for you to manipulate it. What do I mean manipulate it? As long as how actually I can improve my H index. The easiest way is to publish a lot of review articles, because just now I told you all, right? Review articles is a summary of everything. So if I keep summarizing a lot of people's work, right? So most people will keep reading it because it's easy to read and provide a lot of information. So the review articles normally is very easy to get a high citation. So if I publish a lot of review articles, that means of course there's a lot of my papers will be cited more highly, then my H index will go up. And so there's now people are, like trying to boost their H index by using these writing review articles, which is I think it's a good strategy, it's an effective strategy. But of course, if you keep writing only review articles, they publish 10 papers, every single one of them is review articles for every year. In the last 10 years, right, when I check somebody, all his paper is review articles. I won't think too highly about the fellow, The reason is he's just a journalist. When I say journalist, that means he's just like a reporter, writing papers, just keep summarizing other people's work without having their own work. What makes us a scientist? Our science refine us. As a scientist, our scientific output defines us. That means our own science, not the ability to summarize other people's science. That's a journalism, not scientists. All right. So this is how H index works. So I know it's about 1.5 hours already. I still have a few more slides. So let's ask some questions. The first question, do not cite paper which is 20 years old or older. How many of you say yes? 20 years, ridiculous. Now it's 2022, 2002 and before. Even some of you haven't been born yet. So why should I cite such a long, old papers? So forget about it. Literature review is about the currently, right? We want to focus on current. How many of you agree we shouldn't cite? Do not cite the paper which is 20 years old. Put 1. If you don't agree, put 0. Okay. Somebody say, let me see. Somebody say he still cite. Hafiz say he still cite a paper that's 1988. Right. Then a lot of people say agree. Say yeah. Okay. Then Ong say no, I don't agree. So there's people say agree and people not agree. Right. I'll say generally this statement is not right. If you just generally say do not cite a paper that's 20 years old, I don't think it's right, because it really depends on the context of your research. For example, let me give you a very good example. This is one of the observation I made in my PhD study. I don't go into detail about science, but this thing is I coded the iron oxide particles with gold nanoshells, and eventually I saw the color change and things like that. But in fact, right, after I do literature review, I just realized there's one paper published. I don't know whether you all can see it. Can you all see when the paper has been published? 1951 by two very famous scientists, Arden and Coker. This paper published in 1951, which is 50 years before my PhD. And they are developing a very nice mathematical model to calculate, to explain why the color changed, with the nanomaterial. Remember, 1951, there's no nanomaterial at all. They're doing it purely for scientific purposes, mathematician, right? So they just do it. They just imagine if we have this nanomaterial and these structures, then if we change the structure, the color will change. Almost 60 years later, when I do my work experiment, then only I realize this, and eventually I check. There's people smart enough who predict this is going to happen 60 years ago. Of course, during that time, they do not have any skill or any technique to make it happen. So it's only making sense for me to cite this work, right? Because I can now use their mathematics to analyzing my results, right? Even though that's 1951, right? So I guess it really depends. You shouldn't be too blindly to put a time limit on how long it is and things like that. Of course, if your master degree, right, of your master thesis all cited papers 1940s, 1915, the whole reference list is 1940, 1950, then something is seriously wrong. That means your study is very, very obsolete. Which means in the lately or recently, nobody even care about this research area anymore. For example, before the transistor is vacuum tube. If now you're telling you want to do a research on vacuum tube, everybody will laugh at you because there's no any application on vacuum tube anymore because it's been replaced on transistor, right? So it is fine if you want to cite paper, which is 20 years, 30 years, even 100 years old. But if all your paper's reference is 100 years old, then something is seriously wrong, all right? So let's just go to the evaluation of finding. All right. So, you know, I tell you all, I told you all, right? I'm fortunate enough to have a very good PhD advisor. In fact, I have two. One is from engineering and one is from physics. And there are two of them are very nice. I still remember the first time when I go to meet my main advisor from because I'm from chemical engineering. So my advisor is chemical engineers. Then he's the very good advisor, right? So he do all these things for me. For example, he point me to the right directions. And he even gives me a paper for me to read. This is the first paper I received for my PhD advisor. Do you know how much he's my master thesis advisor? And this advisor, he also tell me, he's very responsible to tell me this is a very top scientist in our area. Actually, it's a professor from Princeton University, Dudley Essevier, his friend, right? So he passed me this paper. He's a good advisor. He gave me a paper and written by the top scientists. Do exactly what I told you all, pointing me to the right direction. Then, of course, it told me the whole work is sponsored by NASA. So my master thesis, actually, the whole thing, the idea is actually working on the NASA project. So I'm so excited about NASA project and things like that. And think about and look at the title. It's called Electrokinetic Properties of Fuzzy Colloidal Particles. During that time, I don't know what is electrokinetics. I know properties, I know of. Fuzzy, no idea. Colloidal, no idea. Particles. So even the thesis, even the paper title, right? I only know 50%. That means I know 3 words out of 6 words together. But remember, you know, we are all very smart, right? That definitely you can understand it. Then I start reading literature review, right? So I start reading. This is how I read. This is the first paper I read about it. Then I come across mathematics. You know. Then I come across more mathematics, and this mathematics have certain stupid symbol. You know, it's not only triangle, then a triangle tilted away, then triangle have another triangle, then triangle and triangle. Then eventually they even have this stupid symbol of this dot line, straight line, broken line, arrow, whatever. But remember, I'm smart, right? So of course I could really understand it. Then the next page, when I flip over, and more mathematics. Then I turn over, I have more mathematics. Then more and more mathematics. And this is exactly how I look like after I reading my first paper. That's exactly how I look like. My PhD advisor doing fantastic job. You know, she point me to the right direction, giving the best paper, almost like Bible, you know, the Bible written by top scientists in my area. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And what happened is the paper is so difficult to read. Almost during that time at my level, it's almost impossible to read. And that's exactly how I feel like. Right. So I guess it's really important, you know, we should read the easier article first. That's the reason I keep telling you all, maybe when it comes to find model part, right? Remember during the find model part, finding a review articles, because I think review articles is much easier to read compared to the research articles, right? So it is very important for you to read easier to read articles first. And in fact, one thing that actually I noticed is nowadays, right? Most students do not read book anymore because everybody just access information online. Now, for example, my university, USM, right, the library, even during the semesters, if I go to the library is like a haunted house. There's nobody around, you know. There's only air conditioning, is very cold, but no student around. Library only been very, very occupied during exam weeks. Then everybody, all the students come in and join aircon and study for the exam, not because for a reading purpose. So let's talk about this. For research, now I'm not talking about study for exam. For the research, right? Do not read or cite textbook because the information presented in the textbook is very old, like that just now, very old and outdated. How many of you won't read the textbook or books for your research? Can I put 1? Yes, I didn't read books anymore because the book is so old-fashioned, only for Uncle Lim. Uncle Lim read books, right? Okay, so if nobody put 1, so I assume actually everybody read books. I guess this is very important, you know. Remember just now I showed you all the paper, right? The reason why I become so intimidating by the whole paper is because the paper has a lot of really difficult mathematics and physics that I don't understand. When if you finally identify a key scientist and you finally found his paper that a lot of people are talking about, it's almost like a Bible in the research area. But the moment when you start reading it, you can't understand it. Maybe it's not your fault, no? Maybe you just do not have enough knowledge or enough fundamentals for you to understand the papers. So when it comes to literature review, I think it's important to build our fundamentals. So you really need to read some books, especially books written by a good scientist in your area that provide you with fundamentals. That is very important. So do not underestimate the impact of books, especially you should read the books, right? And when it comes to reading article like just now, right? For the like paper I showed you just now, so difficult to read, right? I have some actually, I would say there's few things that I would like to remind you for the preliminary scan, right? Don't read the article closely to avoid getting more in the detail. Do not, I saw a lot of especially undergraduate students, when they start to do their final year project, they write to read introduction, follow with, you know, background information, follow with experimental method and things like that. You don't do it because remember your time is very, very limited. Like just now, if I follow my talk just now, you already have certain questions, right? I only want to understand the influences of X on Y and Z, temperatures on time and things. I do not want to understand other things. So you really need to have this target in your mind, then only you focus into it. Do not keep reading every single piece of words in your articles that you found, right? You need to be very selective because your time is limited and the time is the most important resources in our life. So we should utilize these resources properly, right? Then of course, you know, something, what are the author's academic reputations? You always want to read, you know, paper written by the top scientists in your area and things like that. And identify research questions, hypotheses, and things like what we discussed just now, objective or does their work and things like that. There's so some questions that you can ask yourself when you start reading or evaluation your finding. That means to evaluate your literature review, right? I guess the next one, analysis or interpretation. I still want to go back. Let me see just now. Okay, when it comes to analysis and interpretation of literature, right? Look at this cartoon. What the meaning of all my facts are wrong? I copy every street of the internet, right? Remember, I think your advisor is not stupid, you know? Your advisor is not stupid. The examiner, thesis examiner is not stupid. It's very easy for you to Control C and Control V, right? Control C for internet and Control V paste into your thesis. It is also very easy for us to do the reverse engineering, you know, Control C and Control V. It's all very easy for us to Control C from your textbook and Control V into Google and search for it. Especially, you know what? Especially we are not native English speaker, right? So our writing skill always need to polish. Then you found your writing is not okay, it's good, but it's not very. Out of nowhere, there's one really beautiful written sentence which is out of the standard of all the writing. Then we immediately know something is wrong. Then it's very easy for us to Control C that sentence and Control V to Google and search, and we know, oh, he is actually copy and paste directly the whole sentence that coming into this, and this consider plagiarism. So please don't do it. It's very easy, especially for advisor and examiner to actually detect this, right? So do not copy and everything into the thesis, right? I guess, okay. When you interpret the literatures and things like that, one of the things is how do different authors cite the same books? One author may explain method of area study, describe the result in great detail, and cite it repeatedly, while another may be given it on passing on references. This comes to the one really important aspect is called cross-referencing. Let's say, for example, I read paper written by Dr. Fritri. Then Dr. Fritri say, he write a paper and say, he put the references, Josh Whiteside and the team say this, right? Then when I write my paper, then I cite Dr. Fritri work and say, Josh Whiteside say this thing. In fact, Dr. Fritri is the one that read Josh Whiteside paper, not me. But because I read Dr. Fritri cite Josh Whiteside, so I just cite her and say, Josh Whiteside say this. And this is considered cross-referencing, and it is wrong. If you want to cite Josh Whiteside, you should directly go and search for the reference provided by Dr. Fritri and read the paper and cite the paper in the reference list. Not through Dr. Fritri paper to reach Whiteside. That's called cross-referencing, and it's wrong, and you shouldn't do it. All right? And one thing I think is very difficult, especially nowadays, because now we are very superficial, rich in the very fast-paced environment and fast-paced community or society. Everybody just want everything to happen very fast. But let me remind everybody, the science, and also myself as well, science needs time to happen, especially for experimentalists. You need to do good quality experimental work in order for it to happen. So you really need to give yourself enough time to write. And especially for master student, you do not wait until last minute. I know, because nowadays undergraduate students always like to wait until last minute, then only write a lab report or report whatever. The thesis have to be written in months, not in days or not in hours. It won't happen. It takes months. So you really need enough time for you to read the literatures and digest information provided inside. So you really need to put time. So when you first started the master's thesis, the literature review should be immediately started after that point. That means you should be constantly reading and collecting information. All right, I guess this is the question just now. I don't know who is the one that asking me. Okay, Vita, I'll come back to your questions later. I just want to go back to just now. Okay, Kalinta just now asked me how many articles must be reviewed. That means how many articles we have to include in our reference list, like in order to create one review articles. Now I'm writing, remember what's review articles? Review articles is for me to write something to summarize other people's work, right? So I should have, summarizing a lot of people, then the reference list will be very long, right? So that's exactly this, right? I should cite at least X number of articles in my paper, right? How many papers should I cite in my articles, in my papers? Especially, let's say we talk about research articles easy. So I write something, then I report my own result. How many number of reference should I include that you think is making sense? Anybody? Do anybody want to start with your number? Since Karinta is the one. Karinta, why don't you give me a number? How many? How many do you think? I hope Karinta is still here. Okay, Karinta says 40. Karinta is very ambitious. She wants to read 40 papers and cite 40 papers. Lukman says 20. So Karinta double Lukman number. Anybody want to double Karinta number and get up to 80? No, I think 40 is too less. I want to go for 80. Right? So nobody want to make a guess. All right. The answer for this, right, I guess is, let me ask you all another. Now you look at it, my question, I frame my question. I should cite at least XX number of articles in my paper, right? How about if I say I should write 2 kg of paper in order for me to publish? Or I told my student, in order for you to graduate, your thesis should be weighed 1 kg. So when you come, you knock my door, Prof, I finally finished my thesis, hand it over to me, right? Then I have a scale in my drawer, then I take out a scale, then I weigh your thesis. 950 grams, you left 50 grams, go ahead and add in 50 grams more in order for you to graduate. It is very stupid, right? Very ridiculous, right? How silly it is. 5 kg, 2 kg, 3 kg. That's exactly the concern, right? The number shouldn't be the concern. The concern should, what what kind of the reference list actually have a high quality, right? So if you write a very concise research articles, even 10 reference lists, even 5 reference lists, 5 papers, if you have 5 good papers, or very short papers, but a very good theory and things like that, 5 is good enough. But for review articles, most probably because you're summarizing a lot of other people's work, right? But if you're summarizing, if your research area is very small, 40 make a lot of sense. But let's say, for example, chemistry, let's say organic chemistry, especially for nanomaterial, a lot of people nowadays working on the nanomaterial synthesis and things like that. Most of the the review articles have 400 to 500 reference lists, a lot review articles for things. So it's really subjective. It depends on the nature of your work and also the targeted group of people that you really want to go for, right? Anita, I hope I answer your questions. I'm sorry because there's no answer for your questions. It really depends on your field. If your field is a very active field, a lot of people involved, especially recently, a lot of people publish a lot of ideas, then the reference list will be very high. That can be up to a few hundreds. It won't. There's some journal they can, or some paper that I read, you have 1,000 citation. 1,000 reference lists. I won't be surprised, right? So there's no any definite answer for it. So it really depends on your the title of your thing focus. But there's one interesting thing I want to bring it to your attention, because now we're talking about all this number, right? Now, now I want my student to write 1 kg of thesis, right? I don't know how many of you know this guy. Let me see. Do you all know him? Right? John Nash, right? He won Nobel Prize in 1994. There's even a movie by Kurt Russell, played by Kurt Russell. I think the young generation didn't watch this movie. Only I think even Dr. Fritri is too young to watch this movie. Maybe I watched this movie, A Beautiful Mind, during my high school. It's talking about him. You know what is so cool about him? He won Nobel Prize based on a theory called game theory, which he published when he's still a student in Princeton, PhD student. So his PhD work win the Nobel Prize, It's not like after he became a professor, he PhD win the Nobel Prize. And this is his PhD thesis. That means the thesis he write and eventually win Nobel Prize. Look at how many page numbers he have. 27 pages. His PhD thesis composed of 20 pages, 27 pages, and he win the Nobel Prize. Right? Oh, there's some of you say you actually all of you watch it. All right, so I think Dr. Fritri says she watched it, and Vidya so watch it as well. Right? It's a very nice movie. But for those who haven't watched this movie, I strongly recommend you all go and watch it. But the thing is, I want to tell you this thing. When we are so obsessed, especially in the ASEAN region, I just like Malaysia, Indonesia, even Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, we are so obsessed. Students are so obsessed to create a thick journal, a story, thick thesis. My friend have 200, now I have 300, then 400, and there's some student create 2 volumes of thesis, volume 1, volume 2, volume 1, 300, volume 2, 300. All you need is 27 pages to win the Nobel Prize. So relax, you didn't need to have 5 kg thesis. All you need is like 1 gram thesis to win the Nobel Prize, right? Okay. This is a mistake that my student made during the literature review that I really want to share with you. I think it's too much. I just want to share with you one really important mistake that every single student make and make all the time, which does not clearly relate the finding of the literature review to the researcher own study. A lot of these students, they write literature review as the literature review. If it's inside the thesis, right, there's a chapter 2, right? One chapter is literature review. Then all the references is in the chapter 2. In the paper, all the references is inside the background information. But when it comes to their results, the results and discussion have very, very few references, or it has no references at all. They're not even cite anything. It's almost like their literature review is for the sake of literature review, and they didn't relate it to their work. So important, especially when you publish and you report your work, you should have related it to your literature review. I guess that's the most important thing, right? Of course, students like to wait until last minute, then cross-referencing, uncritical accept, they just didn't put in effort into analyzing is common. But I want to make sure, I want to ask you, especially when you start writing your thesis, right? Go and check your result and discussion section. If your result and discussion section only have as shown is this figure, the things up, then it's all down, up and down, it's only reporting phenomena without citing the references, then you're making a very serious mistake, and maybe you shouldn't do it. All right, so here are some summary, know your area in order to write journal, especially if you don't know this, you should ask your advisor. Do not blindly believe in impact factor. And when it comes to literature review, it is good, to know the top group in the research area. And we're scientists, so literature search should be based on our scientific judgment or instinct. Sometimes citation metrics can be helpful as well, right? So do not blindly based on citation, H-index, whatever numbers. We should really go and read the papers. If you think highly about somebody, right, you should go and read his work, not just relying on H-index. For example, if you think this guy is stupid, but before you make a judgment on me, not based on my H-index, not maybe based on the impact factor of the journal I publish, but really go and read the paper I publish and assess yourself. I think this is a very important message. And with this, I thank you all for your attentions. Sorry, I think I take more than 5, I thought I want to give 15 minutes, but I think I exceed the time by 5 minutes. But anyway, thank you so much for your attention. I will be very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor JitKang Lim. I'm so sorry because my device is not working, so I will talk with this account. Thank you very much for a reminder for us, especially because as we're talking about writing and publishing, I think it is our responsibility as scientists and also students, researcher, to publish and to communicate our research. So the other researcher will know about our research, and this is also good for the development of study field. Okay, and now let's check the questions book. So everyone, if you have any questions, please.
Let me answer Mita question first. I think I forget to answer Mita your questions. Which is if our paper if our paper doesn't have any citation, what's the reason for that? What should I do to prevent that happening? This is very easy. If you write a paper without a single citation, right? For example, let me remember my master thesis, right? My master thesis is sponsored by NASA. It's really a NASA project. Actually, during the time, they are thinking about for long distance exposure to microgravity. Then what's going to measure the glucose level of the astronaut and things like that. So then we're having an electrokinetic control strategy that we developed for the NASA and things like that. Of course, it's saying it's we developed the NASA. Of course, it's not like if my advisor got a grant from NASA. It's not I will go and work for NASA, right? The thing is this. During the time, I think it's only 3 groups or 4 groups in the world that could actually understand what we're doing. And after I took 2 years to do my master thesis, then I start writing. But normally my PhD advisor, she's very picky, right? So we write the paper that I wrote from my master thesis by 34 rounds. That means I write 1 round, then I submit to him, he correct, then give it to me a ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, 34 times. Finally, in 2009, I finished my master thesis in 2005. Finally, in 2009, I managed to publish this paper after 4 years. Of course, then you think about, wow, you spent 4 years to write this paper, and this paper, the thing is sponsored by NASA. Of course, the science is very good, right? Guess how many citations I got for the paper in the last, from 2009 until 2019, 10 years. 6 citations. Out of 6 citations, I cite myself 2 times, So eventually only 4 citations. And why 4 citations? Because when doing this kind of thing, electrokinetic control of the nanoparticles under microgravity, very few groups doing it, right? Very few groups have that, have expertise and maths and things like that doing it. The other 4 groups that actually doing this include our group. Remember just now I talked about Dudley A. Severe, right, from Princeton. They cited us one time. Then the other 3 groups cited us one time, 4 plus 2, 6 times, right? So I guess citation, we shouldn't be too obsessed with citation. Citation is not everything. Nowadays, a lot of people try to convince you all, or try to convince us, citation means quality. If your work have serious quality very high, you also have high citation. I can argue it. Citation means a lot of people doing the similar thing like you. Then of course, right? Why people cite you? Because they do almost very similar thing to you, right? Then the information present on your papers and will benefit you, right? And if I do a very low tier work, right, like drying banana. Now I'm drying banana. I'm living in Penang. The district I'm living is called Nibong Tebal, right? I'm drying banana in Nibong Tebal. Then like later on, I go to Bandung. I get the banana from Dr. Fritri. I drying banana in Bandung. I drying all the banana here and there, anything like that. I just dry banana, I just put inside the oven and drying it. Then I write a paper. Drying banana from Parliamentar, then drying banana, Bandung, drying banana. I published 3 papers, right? Bandung, Nibong Tebal, I go to Kedah, I go to whatever, then I keep writing drying banana papers. That's very easy to write, right? Then eventually you think about it, if I keep citing myself, I dry 1,000 species. I always travel, right? I can travel to China. China have so many districts and so many species, banana and things like that. I just keep writing. That citation will be very high. And I guarantee you, I will not be the only one that dry banana because it's so easy, right? Everybody can do it. So everybody start drying banana. Then eventually all the people who drying banana or bananalogy, the new area we call bananalogy, and bananalogy people all got few thousand to 10,000 citation. Do you think this working on this banana, drying banana, have higher quality than what I told you just now, electrokinetic control, blah, blah, blah? I don't know. I think it's subject to your own review, right? To your own assessment. But I will say it, especially if you got very low citation at the very beginning, especially only when I was still young, right? I say Ibu Wita still very young. If you publish a paper in the next 2 or 3 years, you didn't get a single citations, I think it's perfectly fine. Don't worry too much about that. If your work is really good, the citation will eventually come to you. What we really don't want is we publish a really lousy work and get cited too much. Then everybody knows you're writing a lousy work, right? Right. So the easiest answer for me to you is learn from a mistake, right? Remember just now I master thesis, right? Only me and other 4 groups are doing it all together, a whole world, only 5 people doing electrokinetic and things like that. If you really care a lot about your citation, I know because especially currently in Indonesia, Malaysia, the university evaluate young lecturer based on a lot of stupid matrices, H index, impact factor, whatever. So they just measure your performance and your promotion is purely based on this number. So sometimes you're forced to have some citation or whatever. Then I'll say you really need to identify on the area that a lot of people are working at. So it's very easy for you to accumulate citation if you're working on a hot area. The hot area like what? Like for example, now recently the very hot area is graphene, battery material, battery research. If you work on battery, nanomaterial battery, you got a lot of citations. Z, the ion polymer that have 2 different charges and things like that, you got a lot of citations. And if you work on those areas, you got a very high citation. You will get a very high citation for sure, just because there's a lot of people working on it. All right, Ibu Wita, I hope I answer your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Lim, for the nice answer. Yeah, because it is sometimes happen to us. Some people also like really want to get high citations, but yeah, sometimes we are trapped. Finally, sometimes we are trapped into the self-citations. Sometimes we still cite our previous work in our recent work. So yeah. So for now, yeah. How about that, Professor?
We need to acknowledge this thing. The odd is stacking against us. When I say odd, what is the odd? Malaysia, Indonesia is a developing country. if you publish a paper, let's say you're from MIT, you publish a paper, something like that, the visibility will be there because people will look at, like just now when I tell you, like you should look at who is your author, something like that. Of course, we are paying attention to those authors from the top university because those are top university, because they are most probably they are doing the top work and things like that. So why does odds stack against us? Because let's say University of Science Malaysia, how many people really think University of Science Malaysia is top university? UPI, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. It might be very famous in Indonesia. Locally, people all recognize this is a good university. But outside of this country, how many people see it as a top university? And the reputation of all university, of course, as even let's say you work in a very good university, but from developing country, the odds is still against us, right? So we have to acknowledge this. So the citation, once we understand all these things, I guess we could more calmly, we can take it emotionally, we can calmly accept it, right? Do not get too depressed when, especially you do a good work, you publish a good paper, and eventually you got a very small citation. Let me share with you. You taught top professors from top university. I work in Carnegie Mellon. That's a top 5 engineering school, right? One of my professors, Lee White, he's one of very famous mathematicians. He's a mathematician, but he worked in engineering school. He win a lot of awards and things like that. He do really difficult maths for nanomaterials, colloidal science. And sometimes his work, right, is so difficult, the maths, only very few people can really understand it. His citation is very low as well, right? It can be few, 3 or 4, right? So it's not uncommon especially for good work, to receive a very small citation, right? Even from a top professors. All right, and Hafiz say something about he remember de Broglie win Nobel Prize with his dissertation. Yes, exactly. The de Broglie equations, right? Win Nobel Prize and things like that. How's the de Broglie thesis is also a very small thesis. If I'm not mistaken, it's almost the same size like John Nash, or even lesser than John Nash. Right, but anyway, we only need one paper to win the Nobel Prize, so we can need 2 papers. Right.
Probably, may I have question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess we still have a short time before we close
Yes.
this session. So especially for our senior and master student, especially a couple years ago when we were facing COVID, yeah, the student unable to do research work in the laboratory. So the choice is they went to the literature review, and the most case they choose a kind of narrative literature review. But yeah, it somehow we still very challenging, yeah, to avoid a kind of copy paste traditions, yeah, rather than rewritten. So in at this moment, if you could share with us how to avoid the copy paste way in terms of writing literature review, how the student can do rewrite, yeah, rewritten the reference that they cite for the literature review better or more careful.
Sure. All right. I guess there's 2 level. There's 2 level answer here. On one hand, we want to tell the student that ethically it's not right for you to copy and paste. It's considered plagiarism. Even you can plagiarize your own work. That means I publish one paper. Let's say I already published one paper. Remember, when I publish, the copyright is transferred to the publisher mostly, unless you go with open publication, thing like that. Then if I write my second paper, because my second paper, a lot of experimental method have been described in my first paper, right? I will just copy and paste from my first paper into my second paper. I'm the one that writing it, and I'm doing the same thing. But that's considered self-plagiarism, right? Even that is considered wrong, right? Ethically, you shouldn't do that because you're self-plagiarizing, you plagiarize yourself. For the students level, we have to acknowledge, especially as advisors, we need to acknowledge we are not non-native English speakers. So the advisors really need to play an active role in checking the student thesis and student papers and write together. So remember just now the papers that I wrote with my advisor, 34 round. So even I copy paste everything. After 34 round, I keep writing and editing and things like that. The whole thing is gone, right? All the copy paste and gone. Right? I think that's one thing. So we can't just keep asking a student stop plagiarizing, stop copy and paste, because we know it's going to happen. at the university level, let's say for example, like Science Malaysia, actually we have an office from the library. It's actually taken care by library. They have a program. They have a app called Turn It In. I think that means once we submit the thesis for graduation purposes, they'll go through this Turn It In process where there's officers and things like that. They just use a software to scan through the whole thesis. They're coming out with plagiarism reports. And let's say if your plagiarism report, let's say you have 3% of your sentences is actually, you can find a similarity online. Then most probably the sentences actually is copy and paste from your papers and things like that, that's fine. But if let's say the percentage is more than 30%, right? Then the thesis will be coming back to student and student need to do editing. Like this is how the university, at least USM, are doing now. That means they actually check the plagiarism and things like that. And for the students, you really need to tell them to nurture them in the right direction. And for the university, need to put in efforts. Of course, the majority efforts is for on people like you and me. We are the donkey, like doing the most of the work. We really need to read the student these papers, theses, and things like that. And also, Dr. Fritri also asked, how about the paraphrase technique as an aid to rewritten? All right, I think this is a very powerful way. You know what? Especially one of the things that I didn't tell my student. I think it's too dangerous to tell my student, but now I'm going to tell you all. I think it's too dangerous to tell you all as well. When it comes to doing a literature review, right? You know what? When I do my own literature review, I always copy and paste. I always copy and paste the whole sentence that let's say, for example, this is information I'm searching, right? I copy and paste, then I'll put a reference for this sentence from this journal, so the DOI for this journal. Because later on, when I finally start writing, I've been reading 40 to 50, 70, I don't know how many papers. So sometimes when you come to describe a phenomena or discussion, you just realize, I remember there's such a powerful idea by somebody that I read before. Then I already miss it, right? So that's the reason why paraphrasing is important, because now I retain the whole sentence there. I'll just use that sentence, but I rewrite the whole sentence by myself. I think it's a very powerful way of getting the idea across, but at the same time to avoid plagiarism. And I think you all should really exercise it and practice it, right? But the dangerous part, of course, is so, especially, like some writer, they are rewriting a very beautiful sentence. It's so beautifully written in which you can't even change anything. Then you just retain it there. So that's the danger of it, right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, because I think the time is almost run off. So everyone, maybe if you have another question, so we will have next meeting in our in next week. We will have other seminar with Professor JitKang Lim also with us. And thank you very much, Professor, for today's talk. Really insightful and really excited. It is a kind of good reminder, not only for our students, but also for ourselves as a researcher, and also